Hi, I'm Brittany Prishak. I'm the Sustainability Manager for Allegheny County. Allegheny County is committed to sustainability. One of the ways that we walk the talk is by composting. We separate food waste from several county facilities, partner with AgRecycle in Pittsburgh to turn them into compost. Just this last year in 2019, we composted 3 tons of food waste from 3 different county facilities. Over the Boathouse restaurant here at North Park, the Schumann Detention Center, and one of our cane facilities, Cane Glen Hazel. You can help too by composting in your own backyard. So we're going to talk about composting today. I know a lot of folks might be stuck at home, maybe the kids are home with you and you're trying to find something to do. So composting is a great thing that you guys can learn together as a family, and we're going to give you guys an overview, the basics of what materials you might need at home, what kind of composting bin options are out there, the ingredients, what you can and cannot put in your compost bin, and give you just an overview of how the process should work. Keep it pretty simple, and then if you stick with us through the end, we'll give you some more resources where you can find out a lot more information about composting itself. So composting is the basic breakdown of different types of materials, traditionally food or yard waste, leaves, outdoor materials. And it's really important that we actually compost because 20 to 30% of what we send to landfills in the United States is actually food waste or yard waste. All this material can be broken down at home, turned into soil to be reused in your gardens and yards rather than sending it to our landfills. So we're going to talk a little bit about those ingredients. When you compost, there are 2 basic pieces, something we call browns and something we call greens. Our browns are our dry materials, traditionally brown in color. And then our greens are our wet stuff. That's your food waste. So when we talk about what you actually want to go into your composter, some of your browns could be things like wood chips. Whether you get these from just cutting down a tree and you have wood chips left or you buy them. Leaves are a really great source of browns and easily collected in the fall. Other browns could be paper towels, sticks are really helpful. All of these types of materials, they help absorb the water released when our food waste starts to break down. They actually help to keep that smell from happening when you compost. On our greens, anything that's usually a vegetable or fruit is really great. So leftover carrots that might have gone bad, any kind of onion skins or fruit pieces that have gone bad, lettuce that's old or just the rind part. Eggshells are really good. You can crush these up small and they'll compost pretty quickly. And then we've got our coffee grinds. These are actually great. Filter and all can go right into the compost bin. Your apple, whether it's the peel or the core, both are very good for composting. Even leftover pasta, as long as you don't have any sauce or oils or anything on it, if the pasta went bad or you're just not going to finish it, instead of throwing it away, you can actually put it in your composter. Paper towels are really good to put in, especially if they've only been used for water. We don't want to use paper towels with chemicals on them to clean things and then put them in our composter. We want to make sure it's just the water or just the paper towel. Cardboard is a great source, and another thing I love to throw in, all that junk mail that you get at home, whether it's pieces of cardboard or magazines, envelopes that you want to kind of either recycle or compost. Those are great sources of a brown to go into your composter. When you're looking at all these different types of materials, we want to actually work on a ratio. So for our browns, we want more browns in the composter than we want the greens. And the reason being is there's a lot of water that comes out of these greens when they start to break down. So we need those browns to help absorb it. The best ratio is 1 part of our greens to 2 parts of our browns. So if you fill a container of food scraps and you dump it in your composter, you want 2 of those same size containers full of our browns, whether it's the leaves or the wood chips, paper or sticks. All of those things will start to mix together and they'll actually help to compost faster if you've got a good ratio going. One thing to remember as you're starting to put your materials in, when you have all of your greens, the smaller the size, the faster it'll break down. So taking your eggshells and actually crushing them, cutting up your fruit into tiny pieces, that helps to break those down. With the browns though, you actually want them to be a little bit bigger. They'll actually last a little longer as they absorb some of the liquid. Another good thing too is actually you can put whole sticks in, especially for a rotating compost bin. One of the things we really need in compost is oxygen, so air movement. That's why we rotate bins or you turn your pile. Sticks actually help to leave airflow area, whether it's a stick or even that inner tube from your paper towel rolls. Those are really good to throw in whole into your compost bin. So we just finished talking about what ingredients you can put in your composter. Let's talk about the ones we want to keep out of that composter. So when we're composting, some of these items here, these are the ones that are going to attract rodents, maybe insects. They're going to create a smell. In the backyard composting, because it's so contained, a lot of this stuff won't break down. So things that we want to keep out is dairy products, things like creamer. So if you have leftover coffee and you put creamer in it, dump that down the sink, not out in the composter. Sour cream is also another dairy product. If you have a leftover baked potato from dinner, if there was no cheese or dairy on it, then you can put that potato in the composter, but not if you put sour cream or anything on it. Other things that we don't want in the composter is meat, like pepperonis, no scraps from dinner. Cheeses are another dairy, obviously, product, so we don't want any cheese left over, even if it's getting moldy. That'll need to go into the trash. Other things like potato salad, so again, it's got a dairy product on it. We want to keep that out of the composter. Dairy starts to curdle, so that sour milk smell you might notice. We don't want that out in the backyard. Those neighbors might start to complain. We already talked to you about paper towels. So paper towels are okay, they'll compost, but not if we have some kind of a chemical on them. So we want to make sure that we don't put any chemicals in our composter, especially if you're going to use those to grow some vegetables in your backyard. Other things to keep in mind. Tea bags are a great thing to compost, very similar to coffee filters. However, tea bags these days, they're actually starting to be in a plastic bag rather than that paper one you're used to. You can feel the difference. This will not break down in your composter because it's plastic, it's not paper. So we want to make sure we're aware of that when we start to figure out whether or not you can put it in the composter or not. Another thing to keep in mind, lint is another good thing that you can compost. Maybe some dog hair, a little bit of leftover lint or cotton from your dryer. What we don't want to put in is that dryer sheet. The dryer sheet actually has chemical on it. Usually it's a fabric softener. That we don't want in there. However, the box, as long as it's empty, this can actually go into your composter. Okay, so getting started with compost. There's a couple of things that you're gonna need, and there are ways that you can get around without having to spend a lot of money on a brand new piece of equipment. So the first things that I like to look for is something to actually hold on to your compost or your food scraps inside the house. Great cheap things are glass mason jars. Just make sure that it actually has a lid to it. This will actually help to keep the smell in and keep the bugs out until you're ready to take it out. The bigger the size, the more obviously you can fit in it. I always like to do a week's worth of food scraps and then take it out. That way I'm not taking everything out to the compost every single day. Another good option is just a plastic bucket. They sell small 1-gallon paint buckets. These aren't that expensive and they have a lid that snaps on, which makes sure that this seals tight. You can actually purchase compost pails that are for your kitchen. They have carbon filters on them that are meant to help absorb smells and make sure that those fruit flies don't start to grow around there. And those are good to keep right next to wherever you're going to collect your kitchen compost, maybe next to the sink, next to a coffee pot, whatever's the easiest place to do it. And then they're also easy and light to take right out to the compost bin when you're ready. So let's talk about the compost bin. There's a lot of options out there. There are two main types. One is called stationary, and it's basically a bin that's just going to sit there. They also sell rotating bins, and you can make these at home. There's some great YouTube videos on how to make a rotating compost bin if you're feeling up for it. The difference is how long it's going to take to actually compost. So stationary bins, these styles like this, you can actually layer your compost. So browns and then greens, browns and then greens all the way up to the top, and then let it sit. It'll all start to break down. It'll probably take about a year at least for everything to break down before you can use it. If you have a rotating bin, these usually take between 3 and 6 months before you get compost because you're constantly adding oxygen into it and rotating your pile. You can also rotate a stationary bin if you're up for it. Shovel or a pitchfork helps you to actually mix everything that's inside of it. So let's talk about this stationary bin. So you'll notice there's a lid to the top, it comes off. This is where your food waste and your browns will go. So you'll actually dump them in from the top here. You'll see that there are holes throughout the bin. This allows oxygen to flow in and out of the container. At the bottom, you'll see a door. This door opens to allow the compost to come out. The other nice thing about bins like this is you'll see there's no bottom. So as soon as your compost is finished, when you know it's ready, you can actually pick up the bin and let your compost pile sit and move the bin to another location to be able to continue composting. With rotating bins, as soon as it's full, you'll want to keep rotating that bin until your compost is actually finished. It's a lot harder to actually pick that bin up and move it. So these are really nice bins and they're not overly expensive. You can actually use a garbage can. If you cut off the bottom of it and poke some holes through it, it acts the same way as a stationary bin, and that lid will fit nice and secure on top. Okay, so last step. How do we actually know when the compost is finished? So there's 4 things you're gonna notice from your compost bin when you actually go to look at what's left in it. So the first thing is there's gonna be no odor smell. So when you go to smell your finished compost, it should smell like dirt. A good way to test is to take a handful and stick it in a Ziploc bag and close it. Let it sit for a day or 2. When you open it up, if again there's no odor, that means there's nothing left to break down and it's good to go. It should just be like dirt. Another thing you see is actually what it looks like. You don't see any food scraps left in it. It's nice and crumbly like dirt. The other 2 things that you're going to notice is that 1, it should be cooler. As it cooks, you can feel the heat that comes off of it. When it's done and there's no cooking left, it should be pretty cool to the touch. The last thing is the actual size of it. So if you fill this compost bin to the top, it should reduce by about 50% when it's finished. That's all that stuff breaking down and turning into good soil amendment dirt. And you'll actually see a huge reduction in what's in the bin. So this here is finished compost. It is not a direct dirt. So you don't want to plant in this. You want to take this and mix it in with potting soil or topsoil to use. It's full of nutrients. It's going to help retain water for your plants so they don't dry out as often, but we just don't want to use it straight. So again, you take this and you'll actually mix this in with other topsoil or potting soil before we plant in it. And that's how you compost. There's some other great resources online. The U.S. EPA has some wonderful resources and brochures on their website. Another good resource is the U.S. Composting Council. Your PA, the state DEP website, has some great resources, or any of your local nonprofits. There's a lot of them that work in gardening. They have some great resources out there for you. I wish you luck and have fun composting.